Everybody has this unique ability. It's hardwired. It started showing up in grade school, and some people are aware of it, many are not. I have entrepreneurs that come into coach, they've never really defined it, they've never really honed in on it. And because of that, they're doing a lot of things that fall out of that area of excellence or competence. And our goal at Coach is let's get the leader in this area of unique ability, because that's where you create the most value. That's where you create the most impact.
Do you know what they call it when everyone on the team gets to use their personal strengths? That's called magic. I'm your host, Tim Spiker, and this is the Be Worth Following podcast. On this show, we talk with exceptional leaders, thinkers, and researchers about what actually drives effective leadership across the globe and over time. You just heard from Chad Johnson, successful entrepreneur and coach to hundreds of other entrepreneurs, including yours truly. I first met Chad through an organization called Strategic Coach. It was founded over 20 years ago by renowned business thinker Dan Sullivan. Today, Chad helps entrepreneurs from across the country to simultaneously maximize their efficiency and their impact, even as he leads leaders to better understand how to leverage their time, talent, and energy. He also influences them to think more deeply about their purpose and becoming rich in relationships. In this episode, you'll hear what it means and what it looks like to take full responsibility for your growth and development as a leader, no matter where you sit in your organization. You'll have the opportunity to engage with an important idea called unique ability. And you'll have a chance to learn how Chad sees the intentional development of those people we call family. And believe me, Chad and his wife Janice have literally created a boatload of opportunities to do just that. But first, we hear how a couple of famous communicators from the 1970s and 80s taught Chad that it was okay to dream big.
I grew up in Los Angeles in a wonderful Christian home, had a great foundation laid for me. I was actually kind of one of these weird kids that was being homeschooled in the 70s and 80s, which was kind of the bleeding edge of the homeschool movement back then. It was interesting, but it kind of put me in a position, I think early on, to start to look for alternative ways, alternative messages, people that were outliers, people that were doing things in ways that were maybe not the norm or the average or the masses. Like many people, I came across like Zig Ziglar at a young age, right? And if you remember Zig, I mean, that kind of dates me, but he was a voice that playing those cassette tapes before I even could drive, right? Of See You at the Top and those things. I mean it when I say it. When I came across his stuff, it immediately started going, wow, Chad, it's okay to dream. It's honorable to dream. It's good to build great things. You don't need to be stuck where you're at. I just started to have my mind, I think, expanded. I mean, there are so many quotes, to be honest with you, Tim, that literally to this day run through my mind. You can have everything in life you want if you help enough other people get what you want. That servant leadership mantra was really strong with Zig. The harder you are on yourself, the infinitely easier life will be on you. I mean, all these little quotes that Zig would kind of share. And I remember asking my mother and father if we could go to I think it was See You at the Top event that Zig was putting on in Dallas, Texas. And so some of my siblings went, and I was in my teens, and I remember going there for a full one-day workshop to hear Zig. And it really lit a fire in me, I think, to say, hey, you know what? I can effectively someday be a leader. If I'm earnest in my desire to grow, and if I'm a constant lifelong learner and student, and I apply myself and I serve others. And so that was a really big early influence. And then I listened to Jim Rohn and some of those other voices. But another kind of maybe one that might surprise people, but a huge influence on my leadership was the book of Proverbs. I mean, growing up, my mom and dad, they had us in the Word, and growing up a Christian home, and it was like the Proverbs contrast every other verse. It seems like a wise person and a foolish person, right? And you could argue that the wise person, as it talks about in those verses, is really a leader, right? It talks about the hand of the diligent will bear rule, right? And it talks about all of these contrasts between wisdom and foolishness. And that had a huge amount of influence in my thinking, early on.
When you look at the first 4 chapters of Proverbs, it's just one big story about ask for it, ask for the wisdom, and making that contrast that you're talking about.
Yes. So to me, to this day, it's one of kind of the patterns of our home where we're constantly, there's 31 proverbs and there's 31 days in a lot of months, and it really makes for an awesome leadership kind of constant mantra in our home. But anyways, I say all that to say, you'd think, Tim, that a lot of people, they've achieved some level of success or business success or whatnot, that, hey, they love school, they were good at school, they crushed school. I did fine in school, but school annoyed me. I was kind of concerned because I was like, I saw the A students who would really apply themselves and do the work and the homework and like the process of it all. To me, it was a frustrating process. It was one that I was like, and I didn't realize at the time how much I love to learn. I absolutely love to learn, but the way they were having me learn, the process of the learning, what we were learning, all those things were kind of challenging for me. And yet in my off time, I would grab the books, right? And I really was a fan of, like I said, not only, listening to the cassettes, but buying the books, reading the books. And I started reading a lot of those in my early teens, and they started shaping, obviously, the way I thought, the way I acted, the way I showed up in many ways. So I feel like I've had a million mentors through authors that I've never met. As I got into my career and started working in the fire service, was my first job. I don't know if you knew that, paramedic, fire academy. I end up applying to be the class leader for our fire academy, and I got the position. And it was weird because all of the things I was reading, I got to start to apply in that and run what was maybe the best fire academy ever, because I love bringing out the best in the people, and I wanted them all to win. And we joined a team, and then I got to be the class president for my paramedic class, and same thing, assume a leadership role. And my whole goal was to build culture, was to bring people on board, to get them to buy in, to get them to believe in themselves more than they did. Because so many people have such low expectations of themselves. I constantly go around and I hear people speak words where they're demeaning themselves or undermining themselves or undercutting themselves. And I'm sitting here going, no, no, no. You don't realize you are built someone special, created by God for great works. Let's unwrap that. Let's stop. And so, whether it's in those academic environments or then when I got in business, it never changed. I was like, man, anybody that works in my companies, I want you to come in where you're at. But my goal is to get you to leave, if you ever leave, at a much higher place, or I want you to grow so much while you're here that you look back on this time and this is one of the best times of your life because you grew and became more of who you were meant to be. To me, that's really the essence of leadership, is helping people get where they want to go. And so I love those opportunities, and they started showing up everywhere in my life. And, being in business was a perfect world for me in that sense, because that's all I wanted to do was help build people.
As I listen to you unpack that and talk about that passion for helping people to see their value, to realize their potential, to invest in them, to take those steps forward, there's no mystery to me about why you have been a successful entrepreneur, but you have actually built on top of that, besides just having those successful ventures yourself, to where now you are coaching and developing and fostering, guiding, facilitating 350 to 400 leaders at a time through Strategic Coach. And that gives you such an amazing window into the mind of entrepreneurial leaders. And let me just say this to the folks that are listening. I know we've got a lot of folks that are leading in larger organizations. And I'll just say this: I've never seen a larger organization that didn't have as its secret agenda that the leaders within the organization would think like entrepreneurs. They're always wanting the leaders within the organization to think like entrepreneurs. So if you're listening today and you're thinking, hey, I'm not in an entrepreneurial environment, I would suggest to you that the leaders in your organization probably want you to think that way anyway. And so there's something big for us to lean into as we move forward in this conversation. So, Chad, you're around droves of entrepreneurs facilitating their learning all the time. Talk to us a little bit about what are the things that you see with entrepreneurs that you would think, "Oh, gosh, this is a really important leadership concept that we need to keep track of that shows up in your work with entrepreneurs."
It's such a privilege to be in the room, like you said, that I get to be at quite often. And I think that you hit on something that was really interesting. You said some people see themselves as, there are entrepreneurs, there are business owners, those are, these people over here. I would argue that at the core of every person that they are at the core, that we were created to be value creators,
Mhm.
is the essence of personal development. It's the essence of growth. It's the essence of leadership. Because, one of the things I tell my children, I say, you look, you may not ever own your own business. You may not start and found a company. You may not grow or buy a business. But if you can develop a value creator mindset, you are going to be the most, I'm going to say, you go back to, common terminology, best version of yourself is when you are the value creator you are meant to be. And having that capability, that skill set, it automatically puts you in a place of leadership. Because Tim, you said something in your book, which if anybody's not, I don't know how much you tout your book, but I'm gonna plug your book because that book, Tim, and I mean it. Anybody who's listening, that book has a concept in there and a framework and a way of thinking about leadership that I haven't seen anywhere else. And your statement about, being a leader worth following is to be someone who's inwardly sound, outwardly focused. And it's interesting because the entry level employee can be a leader in an organization if he or she is inwardly sound and outwardly focused. And they start to act from conviction, from their own belief of what is right, what is excellent, and they start setting the bar, and then they start living at that level, and everybody looks around them and they're like, wait, you're a rookie, you're new here, you don't have a leadership position, why are you fill in the blank, showing up early, doing your work with such excellence, treating people, going above and beyond, why are you making sure everybody around you is successful? But everyone is leading. Everyone is leading. I think the second we embrace that, my some of my children are younger. They're not in positions of authority or responsibility over anybody. And some of them, their personalities aren't super charismatic or out front or maybe extroverted or dynamic or communicative. And so they sit there and go, well, am I a leader? And my response is, because back to your point, Tim, of it's who we are, it's not what we're doing. By showing up in a place with conviction, with a vision, with a standard, it could be any of those, with a habit that other people look at and go, oh, wow, why is Chloe doing that? Why is she that way? Why does she respond that way? It challenges people, right? And I am convinced in our companies, our growth is limited only by the entrepreneur, the leader at the top, right? And often the leader is the lid. And if the leader is not growing, the whole organization stops growing. And so to me, again, being in the room with these entrepreneurs, Tim, it's a matter of adjusting mindsets. It's reaffirming who they really are. It's helping them think differently about their situation.
Well, I think it's really interesting the way that you frame that to say, ultimately, what are we working on to unleash the greatest level of potential within ourselves? And the answer to that ultimately begins with mindset. Begins that with, what is my perspective on myself? What is my perspective on others? And do I have, if we lean a little bit into Carol Dweck and learning mindset and say, okay, ultimately, do I see myself as somebody who's limited or limitless? Do I see myself as somebody who can learn? And then how do I extend that into others? How do I be careful not to pigeonhole people quickly? Now, admittedly, some people aren't going to step up and say, I really want to lean into this and go for it. And you'll see that, but to not be too quick to, sound the final note on somebody's career or time to say, well, what happens? Maybe I didn't get developed overnight. Maybe a couple of people that work for me won't be overnight either. And so, how do I have an investment mentality, not only in the business? And this is an interesting part to me, given what I do for a living, because you see businesses, especially larger organizations, and they sit in rooms and they have big discussions slash arguments about capex. Where are we going to invest our capital this year? And now we're having conversations about many hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. And we'll debate that about plants and facilities and machinery all day long. But we will not debate that about people. We almost don't even have that conversation. And so I think if we lean into what you're proposing for us here, this idea of mindset, to say, what would happen if we as leaders, and then collectively, what if there was an organization full of leaders who believed that one of the greatest capital investments that could be made in the organization was in the shaping of the mindset of the people in that organization. And so, how are we going to do that at the highest level? We need, I think, and all of a sudden you got me on the soapbox here, but we need leaders who are willing to have battles in that space, and I mean that in the best possible way. Battles in that space the same way we battle in the meetings over capex. Are we going to battle for time, energy, and money in the development of people and shaping their mindset as we would with equipment and facilities and real estate? And you just don't see that very often.
Well, you know what's crazy, Tim, is again, I've been convinced that's one of the things that leaders do differently, and it shows up. The second a person decides to start taking ownership of their personal growth and meaning, I'm not going to wait for the company, I'm not going to wait for the school, I'm not going to wait for anyone else. Entrepreneurs, value creators, leaders own their own trajectory and they are constantly investing. And that's what you're talking about investment. They're constantly investing in the mentoring, the coaching, the educational course, the program. They inevitably will, and not just today, next quarter, and next year, but forever. And that's a leadership trait. And it's so beautiful because, like you said, the emphasis that I love that we have at Coach is that with not only the entrepreneur having this defined unique ability and truly finding the essence of who they are so they can show up authentically, passionately in their best zone of genius, right? This unique ability so that whatever they do, they're doing it to the ultimate A level and they're surrounding themselves with unique ability teamwork, right? Of people who have equal and opposite or complementary giftings, unique abilities, and there's all of a sudden this synergy. But the emphasis on them as a leader, growing leaders. In fact, at Coach, we talk about self-managing company, and a self-managing company is a leader-filled organization. It's
Yeah.
like I want leaders all the way through, right? And I'm going to help them become the leader they were meant to be by helping them determine what are their unique abilities, what are their God-given talents, how do I keep them in that zone and free them from all the collateral stuff by, again, creative hiring, whatnot. So it's like it becomes this beautiful game of freeing the leader, right? Freeing the leader to really lead, freeing the person to really be who they were meant to be. And it's so contrary to the typical, I'm going to say, educational, bureaucratic, sometimes corporate mindset, which is, hey, get a body and throw them at it.
One of the things I'm reminded of as you share that is many years ago, I had the opportunity to work with a leadership development company, and we would take people up to the west side of Pikes Peak in Colorado, and we would put them through a number of experiences while they were there. And the sad reality is we went through those assessments. Statistically speaking, the number one neglected quality of leaders was the development of other people. Basically, they came in and it was, here's all the things I have to get done. And if I have time left over afterwards, we'll worry about the development of other people. That'll be, it's literally the last thing on the list. And as we all know, life's pretty busy and we rarely, if ever, get to the last thing on the list. And so this was the lowest scored leadership quality across the board, class after class after class that came through that experience. And what you and I are talking about is essentially flipping that paradigm on its head to say the development of people, the growth and development of everybody in the organization. We might even especially put an emphasis on leaders. But as you mentioned, hey, if everybody's got a chance to influence, to key off of John Maxwell's one word definition for leadership, then maybe we've got an organization full of leaders. If we're not helping people grow and develop to be the very best of what they're capable of, and uniquely so, then we're missing out. You know, there is that old phrase, it's so frustrating, which, our people are our greatest asset, and almost nobody lives that way. People say that stuff all the time. It makes me want to throw a rock at them. And forgive me if you've been somebody that said that, but how often is it true? And the answer is it's rarely true that we treat the people within our organizations as the greatest assets. So I think the success that you have had and the observation that you've been able to make of all these entrepreneurs that you work with is so important for us all listening here to pause on and say, are we investing in the growth and development of our people at a significant level? Is that a priority? Or is that something that we'll get to whenever we find the time? And of course, we almost never find the time. But to round out this part of the conversation, I want to do a couple definitional things with you because you've mentioned it a couple times and not everybody would be familiar with it. So you've talked about unique ability and you've talked about unique teams. Let's define that a little bit for those that might not be familiar with that terminology.
Sure. In short, Dan Sullivan, strategic coach, came up with a concept called unique ability as a ideal sweet spot for a person to show up and do their best work. And they classify it by having four characteristics. First of all, there's superior skill. You can't excel if you aren't super skilled at it. So a superior skill is a fundamental element. The next is you actually have passion as well. There are people that do things at a high level but have zero passion for it. There's no excitement around it. It's like they're doing it. The third thing is never ending improvement, meaning even though you're excellent, you're an A player in this space and doing this type of work or activity or whatnot, you still are the guy or girl taking the course, learning. The second you find somebody who's good at it, you're like, hey, teach me. You're a constant student at this area. So it's those three things. And then the last one is it gives you energy. People often will be like, I will go to Chicago, tomorrow and I'll coach 3 days in a row, 8-hour days with, 40 to 60 entrepreneurs in a room. And my typical week is 4 days. So I'll go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 8-hour day, just intense, awesome people, just highly engaged. And people are like, oh my gosh, this has just got to tap you. And I'm like, are you kidding? I have trouble kind of winding down afterwards. It gives me so much energy to be around these people and the way they think and the way they do, right? And so those four characteristics are in coach language unique ability. And what's so cool is everybody has this unique ability. It's hardwired. It started showing up in grade school and in junior high and college and whatnot. And some people are aware of it, many are not. I have entrepreneurs that come into coach 50 years old, 60 years old. They've never really defined it. They've never really honed in on it. And because of that, they're doing a lot of things that fall out of that area. And we call those areas an area of excellence or competence or incompetence. And our goal at Coach is, hey, let's get the leader in this area of unique ability because that's where you create the most value. That's where you create the most impact. And to do that, we're going to use unique ability teamwork, which means all hiring, all firing, all bringing in of teamwork or development around team is based on unique ability. So when I look at all those things that I want to do and then all those things I don't want to do, they actually can become a position description for someone who has those unique abilities. And it's crazy because the very thing that I hate, Tim, and you know this, the very thing that I despise, like keeping something organized or managing files, or there are people who that is their unique ability. And so the magic of this synergistic relationship is that. So all of a sudden, if I get free and then they come in and do what they love to do, and we even do the same thing for them eventually and take those things that are in their areas of competence, incompetence, and not unique ability, and we find someone that loves to do that. And so it really is this freedom model that allows us to be and play and do our best.
Yeah. I remember really early on getting some exposure to Dan's work. Oh, it's been almost 30 years ago now. And I remember this idea of that the most high functioning teams, the most well rounded teams were really effective precisely because the people within them were not well rounded. That we were tapping into that unique space for somebody. But when you added that up all together, it created this beautiful puzzle that became a full picture of the organization and what can we do to create the opportunities so that people are uniquely operating just as the puzzle piece that they are. It's hard, it takes work, you have to look for it, all of those kinds of things, but it creates this incredible energy and effectiveness around a team when people are getting to do what they were uniquely created to do. And so that's where unique ability multiplies because now we've got a team where that's true for everybody on the team. And what comes forward out of that is pretty special.
It really is. And it's so life giving to watch these entrepreneurs come in already successful, every one of them already by anybody's standard of in definition successful, and yet often still frustrated, often still facing complexity, often still overwhelmed, often still knowing they feel like they're running on two cylinders and that, they're going, hey, I'm an 8 cylinder, I'm a V8 baby, but I'm running on two. What is it? And to see them unlock that and then start to unlock it with their team and the implications that for me you've heard me talk about my 5 priorities, but I sit there and go, for me, business is number 5. And they're going, "What? I'm getting business coaching from a guy who says business is number 5 on your list of priorities." But it is. For me, it's faith. My relationship with the Lord is first and foremost. And if I'm right there, then I can do my next relationship, which is my wife. Been married 30 years, and I want the next 30 years to be even better than the first 30, which have been awesome, full of challenges, opportunities, all the stuff, but awesome, right? And I absolutely adore my wife. And then the next is children. If you got children, for me, my third priority is my kids. I'm sitting there going, man, I want to see them flourish. I want to see them become all they were created to be. That's my third priority. Fourth, I almost lost my health when I was 10 years old and then also in my early 20s. I mean, really bad. And I realized life and business, it's an energy game. And if I don't have my energy, if I'm not able to bring A level energy to the work I get to do, to the business life, to the callings on my life, I start to underperform. I start to fail in my leadership. It's hard to lead when you're flat on your back in a bed and trying to recover and missing days and whatever. So trying to steward that health. And then fifth, to me, is using those unique abilities, God-given gifts, talents, whatever, to create value. I put, and whether that's in your business, if you're in a company, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an intrapreneur, I don't care where you show up. Everybody, I believe, wants to show up and do their best and give their best and win. And the way we do that is make sure as much as possible we're in unique ability and doing things we're the best at in the world. And so it's like with those 5 things in priority, I start to see this incredible longevity. I don't want to just lead now. I want to be leading for the next 50 years, God willing. I want to lead long. I don't want to lead short. And there's so many opportunities for us to step into in that. And I think I told you as we were jumping on the podcast, I'm so passionate right now of helping young families and other entrepreneurs even that are very successful in their businesses develop leadership models inside their home. Because I'm sitting here going, I believe that leadership ultimately starts at the dinner table. It starts in the kitchen. It starts in the family room. And I don't think this paradigm has really been our paradigm for the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years. I think it's been get your people to other people to, which is fine, to train or to equip or whatever, but there's so much opportunity to help just change the world, I think, if we change the leaders inside our home.
Let's unpack this a little bit because, we've been, and to this point in the conversation, we've been talking about entrepreneurship, business, leadership in the business space. And you've taken a turn here and you've said, what about leadership development that happens at the dinner table? So just expand this for us because I think it's really, to me, knowing the level of success that you have had, knowing that you are a leader of leaders. You're going to be in Chicago next week and over the course of a quarter you're influencing 350 to 400 leaders that you encounter in the business space, but now you're saying, "Hey, what about the dinner table? What about the living room? What about the kitchen? What about at home?" And you're seeing this as a big opportunity. So this is really fascinating.
Well, Tim, coach, we talk about freedom from freedom to. And we realize that entrepreneurs come into a business and they want freedom from certain things. And we talk about 4 freedoms at Coach: freedom of time, money, relationship, purpose. And I know when I came to Coach, I didn't have any of those freedoms. And by God's grace and the brilliant coaching of Dan Sullivan and all the coaches there to coach and just applying it over time, I got to see freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationship, freedom of purpose. I got to see my businesses grow multiple times over and over and income, double and double again and double again and double again. And I started to see my free time do the same thing. And then I started realizing as I was coaching my team members, man, I like coaching. Boy, I love people development. And then I started coaching for Strategic Coach and I started finding the fulfillment in that. It's so interesting. I ended up selling 2 companies in 2021, right? Because I wanted to go into the next thing. Dan has said forever, what activity would you find so fascinating and motivating that you'd want to do it the rest of your life? And I think that's a ginormous question, right? It's like, boom, yeah, think about that, right? Who can answer that? But I tell you what, it's a brilliant question and very few people ever get to ask it or answer it. And I found myself in a position where I was like, maybe I could start to think about that question. And so I sold those businesses knowing that I want my life going forward to be about transformation, about helping people get from where they're at to where they want to go. And as I started doing that in the business environment, I started hearing business people come to me and they're sitting there going, I look at them, I go, hey, how was your quarter? They're like, oh, unbelievable. Business was awesome. Up, boom, boom, boom. We're firing, hiring new people. We're developing new things. I'm like, awesome. but I sensed an underlying angst. And I look at them, I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And they're saying, "You know what? My business is crushing it, but right now a couple of my kids aren't, or one of my kids isn't." And I said, "Okay, that's interesting. What is it?" Tim, I'm a family guy. I have 11 children, right?
That was not a typo, folks. That wasn't like a slip of the tongue. We got 11 bites of the apple here in terms of parenting. So, Chad, you speak, I say this half joking, half not, from a wealth of parenting experience with 11 kids.
I just get more practice than anyone is the way I see it. Tim, I really do. The Lord's given me a lot of at bats here, and I don't want to miss any of them.
So you're encountering folks who are having problems at home while their business is booming.
And boy, do I realize that, what that means to a dad, a mom. Boy, do I realize what that is to a parent, because success in the marketplace is so meaningful. It can be so purposeful. It allows us to be so generous. It allows us to touch a lot of lives. And really, I mean, it's awesome. But if that's thriving and things at home aren't, I'm not okay. And I'm just not okay. And most people aren't okay. And they want to win there. And I'm going, wow, what if some of the thinking that we do in our business life, what if some of the leadership development, what if some of the tools that we're using, some of these concepts were able to be applied in the home to actually ensure the growth, well-being, success, flourishing of our young people? Because it's a crazy environment right now to raise young people. There's so much coming out them. It's mind blowing. And I know it's always been that way. Everybody always says that, but I don't care what they say. This is different. I did not have an iPhone, and none of the people before me had an iPhone in their hand when they were born. It's different. And yes, there's plenty of things that are the same, but I think I got so excited about, Tim. I'm a believer. I look in Genesis. God started with a man and woman. He says, "Hey, we're going to start it all right here. We're going to take off and we're going to build." And he actually says, "Hey, we're going to take, and I want you to make order out of chaos. Go into this garden and tend it and make it nice." And it's interesting because he didn't start with a corporation. He didn't start up with a king. He didn't start with a dictator or a government. He didn't start with county, board of supervisors. He didn't start with a board of directors. He started with a simple little family. And he says, "Hey, go do this awesome work." And leadership ultimately started with, if you're going to take dominion of something and steward it, which is all that business is, it's taking raw materials and putting them in order and taking chaos and making it simple for people, taking complexity, making it simple. And with our young people, I mean, I sit there and go, helping them think about their identity right now, about who they are, what they were created to do and be, and why they can be exceptional, why they are exceptional, what are their unique abilities, talents, all these things. Because I'm sitting there going, you used a term. If my key employees or my key leaders are inwardly sound and outwardly focused, why don't I want that for my kids? And how do I help my children become leaders, inwardly sound people who are outwardly focused? That's a healthy human being. And it makes for a healthy family. It makes for a healthy family culture. And you think about it. It's funny. I took my pastor to lunch recently and we were talking about these things. And I said, are there certain families in your congregation that you don't have to worry about? And in fact, they're actually a resource for you because financially they give, they're there to support, they're there to help others, there to come alongside, they're there to pick up some slack, they're there to be family for those who don't have family. And he's like, "Oh yeah." I said, imagine if more of your families were that way. If all of a sudden you have a leader-filled family and then you have a church with leader-filled families, and then all of a sudden you have a community with leader-filled families who are inwardly sound and outwardly focused, all of a sudden this parenting thing has a whole new shift.
Mm.
And I am convinced, we mentioned Proverbs earlier, Tim, but the scripture is like so clear that, hey, my son, listen to your father's instruction, forsake not the law of your mother. It doesn't say, make sure you're getting around all the best of the best of the best. He's saying you have a leader in your home that is going to be the chief discipler of you. And if we own that as a mantle and say, hey, this is my awesome opportunity, is to raise up capable, confident, wise, discerning, rich in character, sincere, authentic kids that are saved, that are forgiven, that know who they are, and not for my glory, not for my use, so that they can go out into a world that needs people just like that are going to lend a helping hand and that are going to lead and serve and help others flourish. And healthy families get to be that. If we are inwardly sound and outwardly focused, it's not inwardly sound so we get to just go live our perfect dream life and isolate ourselves from all others. No, it's so that we can be of use and go serve so that we can bless others, so that we can help. I see this, people that are free have the joy and opportunity to go help others be free, right? And I believe that in faith. I believe that in finances. I believe that in health. I believe that in parenting. I believe that in everything. And I'm still in the lab, right? And I realize that I will never be done. And just like Tim, just like retirement, at Coach, we don't believe in retirement. We believe if you're doing work you love to do for people you love to serve and you're making a difference in the world, why would you ever stop? Right. And you're getting compensated at great levels. I mean, this is beautiful. So the whole retirement myth, it's gone for so many people that we get a coach. And I say this, the empty nest retirement model is gone too. That's what I want to help remove for parents because guess what? Your kids still need you after you're 18. I mean it more than ever. The empty nest model is so broken. And it's like, oh, hey, I did my part. You go. No, I'm still in your world at whatever level you need me. I'm that guy or gal. And the fruit of it is unbelievable because all of a sudden you start to see multi-generational blessing. Man, you got to we're expecting our 10th grandbaby, Tim. I'm too young for this stuff. It's impossible to me. I'm way too young for this. My 10th grandbaby, God willing, 2 weeks out. Tim, I could go all day on this. This is what I wanna do for the next 25 years, is I wanna help build leaders in homes. That's what I wanna do, in husbands and wives and kids, and because I wanna see the world changed right there from the epicenter of the home.
And it's challenging, right? Because essentially, at one level, we're talking about what does it profit a man that he would gain the world but lose his soul? At some level, I would say it's almost like a corollary to that to say, what would it mean for me to gain the world but lose my family? And so that's a pretty important thing for us to pause and think about.
I constantly referred to flipping success upside down because we've lived in a culture for far too long where success is business success or career success or financial success. It's singular, it's almost binary. We will literally use terms, he or she is so successful. And the only thing we're referencing is their net worth or their business success. And I'm like, that is a jacked up model and I don't want anything to do with that because some of the most miserable, bankrupt, unhappy people emotionally, relationally. I mean, the largest longitudinal study in the history of, that Harvard did over and they published a book about it. It was all what was the summary? What was the essence? It's about relationship. So why do we sometimes fixate on the wrong metric? So I say, hey, flip it upside down. If we can get our relationship with God right, if we can get our marriage right, we can get our kids right, take care of our health, and then be keenly aware of unique ability and those God-given talents, and then just plug in wherever you see the opportunity to go serve and bless in those ways. And believe me, every quarter business wants to take over my life, right? There's so many opportunities, and you know this, so many opportunities to say yes to, and it hurts to say no to things like that, but there's a proverb and it says, my mentor reminds me of this all the time. And he says, there is a man that maketh himself rich and is poor. And then it flips the sentence and it says, and there is a man that maketh himself poor and is rich. And I said, Joe, talk to me. What's that mean? He says, you know what? If we say yes to every opportunity because it's about the dollar and it's just about success, it's just about business growth, it's just about new revenue heights, it's just about millions and billions, he says, we miss out and we actually can become poor. And if we, on the other hand, choose to say no to certain opportunities because you sit there and go, you know what? I really want to make sure that I'm rich in what really, really, really matters. He says, then you're going to end your life. And Tim, the contrast, you heard my mom passed away. You were part of my life. And she passed away April 16th last year. Almost 800 people at her memorial service. She never had a job, never had career success, was a mom of 8 kids, 50 grandkids, wrote letters to hundreds and hundreds of people, just blessing them quietly from her home. And the impact of her life was unbelievable. And the fruit of her life and the way she poured into the leaders underneath her, she was a leader of leaders. And the fruit is the fruit of a life I want. I'm sitting here going, that's the fruit. I want that richness of soul that comes from truly pouring into the things that really, really matter. And we can have that.
What a special example.
I wrote a book, and this book, How to Win a Heart, it's a love story. And I really should change the subtitle, because if someone goes to Amazon, reads the most 2 recent reviews, they'll get kind of the clear picture of what I wrote this for, because it's written for parents who wanna kinda guide their children in building a awesome relationship with their spouse and laying a foundation for that. And it's for young people who are 15, 17, who kind of want an aspirational, inspirational love story written from a guy's perspective, which is kind of bizarre, because guys don't love stories. Um, so, anyways, I plug that out there because I want to see more people married well and really blessed in that relationship, because to me, after God, it's the number one relationship after that. And pouring into that is unbelievable, and it sets a foundation for an extraordinary life. And then some of the marriage work we do, if people want to follow along on my journey, Tim, I do a weekly email called 5 Win Wednesday. They could go to g5summit.com and subscribe to the email there. That's kind of the website I have at the moment.
I've read the book, and my first thought when I finished it was that I need my sons to read this because it'll do a very good job of helping them think through how they move forward in this. And my oldest is 14, and it's just been in the last 3 months where the romance regarding certain individuals kind of kicked up a notch for the first time. What a wonderful story that you have unfolded in great detail for people to follow along with what your story is. And I think as you described it, you just described the demographic in terms of, yeah, it is perfect for 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old, either young man or young woman, but especially young man. I mean, if a young woman's going to read this, I think it's probably going to raise her standard on what she's willing to put up with from, and in a good way. Like, let's raise the bar on what's expected from a young man who's pursuing a young woman. So I think it would be great for a woman to read it for that reason, and great for a young man to read it to look at, what are my standards? What am I willing to do? What does godly pursuit of a woman look like? And so I so appreciate how authentic and open and honest you were about your whole story. And it was really a blessing to get to read it.
You're awesome, Tim. Thank you so much. And that was the intent with that book. So thank you.
I'm willing to bet that you could feel the energy coming from Chad through the audio there as we got a chance to speak. One of the things that I have been so impressed with by Chad over the time that I've gotten to know him is that he is a leader full of energy, and it's contagious. And it's just fun to be around him. And my hope and expectation is that it was really fun for you to listen and lean in as he brought all of his wisdom and energy. A couple of things that he shared that I want to end up with today, putting a little emphasis on. At one point, he mentioned the idea of our own development, and he said this as if from the leader: I'm not going to wait. And I think this is such an important idea. He was talking about development, growth, and development, and the need for all of us to say, I'm not going to put my development solely in the hands of other people or in the hands of an organization, because they may or may not do a great job. We have to have, I think, if we're going to reach our highest potential, we have to have a mentality of, I am in charge of my growth and development. And if the person I'm following, if my leader at work or elsewhere, if my company, if they have great opportunities, then I'm going to take advantage of those. But I'm not going to turn over fully my development to somebody else, because they may or may not come through. They may or may not do a great job. They may or may not understand me fully. And I don't mean that in a cynical way at all. I just say I own my development mentality if we're going to reach our potential. It reminds me of a story a number of years ago. I was visiting with an up and coming leader, really smart and talented individual. And we were talking about how his leader at work really didn't have anything to offer him. He was following somebody who was not a well developed leader, and he was frustrated because he wasn't getting the development of work that he had hoped for and that he'd wanted to have. And as we talked through the details of that situation, it just dawned on me, and we discussed it, he and I did, how interesting it is, because he's telling me, I said to him, hey, is there any quality in this leader that you're following? Is there any quality at all that you would want to emulate? And he said, no. And I said, okay. So if the leader that we're following is underdeveloped and doesn't have the things that we want to be in a leader, why would we expect them to be able to develop us well? Doesn't make any sense, right? They're not going to be able to take us a place where we want to go because I see somebody there who's not developed in themselves. And so there just isn't anything there to offer. So it doesn't make sense for us to wait around for an individual who's not capable of helping us grow and develop to be able to do that magically all of a sudden. And so we've got to maintain that ownership for our own growth and development. I think that's really important. And so when Chad said this phrase of, I'm not going to wait, it made me think of how important it is for all of us to take supreme ownership of our growth and development journey as people and as leaders, and to not just hope that whoever we're leading or whatever company we're working for is going to get it done for us. The other thing that I want to mention here as we sign off is this idea of unique ability. We talked about it at length. He mentioned it many times, and we unpacked it a little bit. This idea that we have unique contributions to be able to make into the world, into the marketplace, and that it's important that we figure out what those are, not only in ourselves, but in the people that we are developing in our organizations. It's important that we be on the hunt for that. And as we got the conversation wrapped up, let's be careful to make sure that we're not only thinking about growth and development of people in our workplaces, but the incredible opportunity that we have in our homes, whether it be with a spouse or a child, or maybe it's a niece or a nephew, maybe it's a brother or sister, but who are the people that are in our families that we could actively invest in their growth and development as well? Who could we help within our family units to help them see and understand their own unique abilities? That we wouldn't stop that mentality in the workplace, that we would bring it into the home as well. And so that leads me to the question I want to leave you with today. And today's question is actually two questions. And that is this: are you willing to look for and invest in the unique abilities of the people on your team at work? And the second question is, are you willing to search for and invest in the unique abilities of the people in your family, so that all of those folks can go out into the world more capable and more confident to create value? This is Tim Spiker reminding you to be worth following and to follow us wherever you receive your podcasts. If you've heard something valuable today, please share our podcast with your friends, colleagues, and family. And if you're up for it, leave us a 5-star review. Thanks for listening.